Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Writers Chat. This is the place where writers like to gather. We talk about writing, all things by writers, for writers, and we are so glad to see everybody here today. We got a lot of our regular crew in the chat room, and those of you that take the time to watch it online afterwards, thank you, thank you. You are as part of our community, even if you're not here live. You are part of our community, and it's a great group between Writers Chat and Serious Writers. So I'm proud to be part of you guys and get to know everybody. My name is Jean Wise. I'm one of the co-hosts, and I'm joined today by our regular crew. This is the second week in a row we had all of us here. We got Melissa here, and Johnny, and Bethany, and we are so glad. And we have a special guest and a really neat topic today. So Bethany, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our special guest and tell us what we're going to talk about.
All right, so I'm excited because I want to have Britt back again to talk about speculative fiction. So he writes fantasy, and he has a hybrid of Christian nonfiction and fantasy fiction. So he does both genres, which is really great. But Britt is one of those people, when you meet him and his wife Becca, you instantly fall in love with them and you are forever friends. That's just the kind of guy that he is. So he's probably one of the coolest guys that I know. So he's a church planner, but he also works at a missional coffee company, and they are the official coffee of the Catalyst conference in Atlanta, which is really cool. When we got to see Britt, they'll hand out free coffee to everybody who's being there, and it's just a super, super great company, Phoenix Roasters. So check them out. They've got 3 kids, and they live in the Atlanta, Georgia area. And I'm just going to turn it over to Britt, because like I said, if you haven't met him before, you're going to just love him. He is one of those, we call it heart family in our house, like not blood family, heart family. That is who Britt is to us and our Serious Writer team, and just so many of you who know him from conferences and things. So Britt, welcome.
Well, thank you so much. Now I feel a whole lot of pressure. I didn't know I was one of the coolest people. You've met a lot of people. I don't know if I can live up to that.
I mean it. I'm not just saying it.
Yeah, so I love you guys so much, and we feel the same way about you and Michelle. We really didn't even know each other that well when you and Michelle invaded our house a few years ago. And we just we pulled everything together and had you guys down here during the Catalyst conference one year, and that was so fun. But no, it has been my pleasure, and I know I've talked to you about this with Serious Writer and some of the people that we've been dealing with. It's a rare group of people that are genuine and quality, and it's just we feel just as blessed to be a part of the Serious Writer heart family, or whatever you want to call it, and there's always room for more, and those just has so much about the community that I love, so I appreciate it.
Oh, that's sweet. And over generous is true. We weren't even going to be at that conference. A little side note before we dig in. We weren't even going to be going, and it was Britt saying, oh no, you guys can just stay at our house, it's not a big deal at all. And that was kind of I'm like, well, maybe we should just go. And that was the conference we met the editor who picked up Platinum Faith. So that would have happened had it not been for Britt being like, just come in, it's not a big deal. Just stay at our house. So those kinds of things that God works together where you just don't know. And so we will always be grateful to you. But I think today we're talking about a couple of really cool topics: podcasting, writers groups, which I know all of us are wanting to do at some point on here. So tell us everything that you know.
Oh my God. All right. Well, I was born a poor child in West Virginia, coal miner. No, I think this is a really good topic because it's something that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about. And I've been on here before just talking about podcasting in general. But I think the marriage and the overlap between having a writers group and doing podcasting is kind of a unique, but also it's kind of a secret thing. And that's part of the Serious Writer group as well, where we kind of give people our secrets. But we just a few years ago, I had a writers group, and my friend Steven and I, we had our writing group, and it was going well. And I was going to these conferences where people, blonde people, were telling me about how I needed to work on my platform. I needed to work on my platform. And so, I was just thinking about ways that I could do that, because part of the encouragement was you don't have to do everything, just pick a couple things that you like, right? And so, so I was thinking, man, I don't want to do everything. What's something I think I could do? And I've been wanting to get into podcasting. So I came up with an idea about how to do a podcast. And yet I started it with my writers group. So I already had a good writing group, and we really clicked, and, we were good friends, especially Steven and I. And for a podcast, it kind of helps to have a couple people to do it with, because people like to listen to conversations. One of the things that, even some star or somebody who does their podcast, they'll have a guest on, or they'll have someone to do a little sort of conversation with them, and kind of process the information with. And so people, I think, just like listening to conversations. So having a writers group to me was kind of a bonus for this particular podcast. So we do the Brew and Ink podcast, and the Brew and Ink is the name of our writers group. And my idea was to have a podcast where we told a story, and we switched the writer every episode. So there would be 2 weeks, and we'd do chapter 1, and we'd kick off a story. And then at the end of chapter 1, we would give the audience a choice. Like, the audience would make the choice for the next chapter, right? So we'd read the chapter on the podcast. And at the end, we'd say, okay, now is the main character going to kill her friend, or is she going to save her friend, or whatever the choice is, and then give that to the audience. And so we use it as like a writing exercise for our writers group. So it was like a writing exercise. So you were going to have a week to do like 1,000, 1,500 words to write the next chapter, and you were going to have to end it on a yes, but, or a no, and, right? I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. But like, when you end a scene, you can't end a scene with everybody happy, or else the book is over, right? So you have to end, every scene has to have its own goal. And so you have to end that scene with either a yes, they get their goal, but it just creates more problems, or no, they don't get their goal and it creates more problems, right? And so we started doing this. And part of my long-term thinking was this: for the platform building, and here's where I think it is very advantageous, and it's kind of a secret, is that we need things to give away in order to build an email list, right? So everybody talks about build your email list, and blah, 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 blah. And so people think about, well, what am I going to write? I'm going to give away one of my books that I've already spent so much time on, or I'm going to write something new. And so what this allowed us to do is to build a little bit of an audience with the podcast, but then collectively as a group, we were able to put together the stuff that we had written already, and we were using it as a writing exercise. And now we can put it together as like a 20,000 word, 30,000 word little book. And now we can go on Book Funnel or wherever and give that away. And then now, so we started that like 2 years ago, and we've had several different seasons of stories, and we're in the 6th season now. And we have 2 books basically that we're giving away on Book Funnel. And of course, we're also having fun, because we get to write and we get to encourage each other, and we also try to have a little bit of a conversation about the story or about something for writers or something like that. So we kind of make it our own. But for me, that was the big secret. Is that now not only do we have a podcast that helps us build a platform, but now we're also generating content that we would probably normally do, and each writer would only have to write 1,500 words every month or so. But now we would, as a collective group, have an email list that we could all use, right? So now so that's been a couple years ago that we've been doing this. Now we have 2,500, 3,000 emails of an email list just from stuff we wrote and just from stuff that we put together as a story. And the voting also helps us engage with the listeners and all that kind of stuff. So it's been really positive. Now, here's the problem that we have run into is that if any of you have been in writing groups for any length of time, people don't stick with writing groups a lot. Like, there are some people that do, right? Some people stick with writing groups. Like my friend Steven and I, we're kind of the core of the podcast because the people in the writing group kind of float in and out because stuff happens, right? I mean, you guys have been around like I have. Stuff happens, life happens, people get divorced, people move, all of that sort of stuff. And so part of the negative is making sure that whoever's on the podcast part of it realizes that they have a commitment, they're committing to something, that they're expected to contribute, because what they're going to get out of it is access to an email list that they can put on a proposal, or they can put on a pitch, or they can do anything. So now, as part of my proposals now, I have a separate email list that I said, I'm part of this group, and we have 2,500 emails. That's in addition to my own 5,000 emails that I've been building on my own over time. And so anyway, so I think it's a great kind of marriage between what I think people should do if they can. I know it's not always easy to be a part of a writing group because you don't have people close to you or you don't have time. But I think writing groups for me has been extremely helpful. I know you guys probably talk about word weavers here at times, but word weavers, we'll give a little plug for word weavers. I'm a leader of one of the word weavers groups, and it's online. So there's ways to do it. But to me, like I said, having something you should already be doing, which I think is really beneficial, which is the writing group, and then also using it to do a podcast and generate content that you can then give away, because you've already given it away. You've already given it away. You've read it on the podcast. You've used it, but now you can put that in audiobook form. Like we haven't done this yet, but you can also put it in audiobook form because it's already recorded. All you got to do is put the MP3s together and take the cover and put it in an audiobook and give it away if you wanted to as well. But we've just done ebooks and given those away. So I've rambled a lot.
No, I think it's wonderful creative. Yeah. It is so creative on that. A couple of people in the chat were saying they kind of agreed with you that, you got to have that core group because people come and go. That's a real common issue, no matter what the writing group is. But how do you handle different levels of writers and different genres? Or do you only attract fiction speculative if that's what you're working on, do you think? How do you handle that?
That is a great question. So in the beginning, we had 3 or 4 of us that were speculative fiction of different kinds. We also have, but we also had like a thriller guy. He was like he wrote, thrillers, kind of things. And he was a good writer. So part of it has to be the agreement that whatever we choose to do as for that season, that genre, we're also just learning how to write. Like part of it's just a creative exercise of saying, like we did one that was a murder mystery, right? We did one that was where we each picked a character and we gave clues and we tried to get people to guess who the murderer was. And, even though that's not my genre, like you still learn a lot about writing by going outside of your genre, quote unquote, and still working with other people. As far as the different levels, I think what helped us was that we had been in the writing group for a certain amount of time before we did this. So we kind of knew each other's level. And also, especially at the beginning, people would share their chapter for everyone to read and comment on before we recorded it. So like it was edited and people would give suggestions and say, well, that doesn't make sense, or, and so, and now what we use is we use Google Documents.
Yeah.
So we're all on a Google Doc together, or we have a file together, and we have Google Documents in there. And so basically we can each go in there and edit and make comments and stuff like that as somebody's writing the next chapter. And so again, just like with a writing group, even someone who may not be at the same level as a writer, they can get encouragement, they can get, suggestions, they can get kind of a push on different aspects of their writing. So again, like I said, we use it as sort of a writing prompt at the same time, and learning how to be better writers at the same time. So
we did have a couple of questions. I want to, scrolling up just a second. Norma said, how do you decide what your podcast will be about? And then the second question, which, because they might tie in together somehow. And then Rondo said, there must be only one final arbiter of content. So really one about how do you decide, and then one about like who makes that final decision about what's going into the podcast as part of your writing group.
Yeah, so for us, that was a struggle in the beginning for reasons you can probably imagine, that that some people, sometimes people, this may surprise you as writers, but sometimes people bristle when you give, they give you a little feedback on your writing. And so what we ended up doing was saying in the beginning, the first season, and this is where we learn what not to do. Just like with everything you do, the first time you do it, you learn what not to do. In the beginning, we would give suggestions, and then the person who wrote that episode or whatever that chapter was, they would have they would basically get to write what they want. Well, we got off the rails really quickly with the story, right? I mean, if you know anything about story and story arc, and and it kind of started out as one kind of story, and it, morphs into these other things, And so it was fun, but at the end, when you looked at it as a whole story, you were like, like this, it's not as good as it could be. So with the second season, we put a lot more planning into it ahead of time as a group. So as a group, we were like, look, let's come up with the characters, let's come up with the arc. Even if it's not a detailed arc, at least let's know where is the story going? Like, where are we going to land the plane? And so we all have the same focus, instead of just like writing, kind of the writing by the seat of your pants as a group, which, as you can imagine, is sometimes a disaster, because you're like, wait a minute, where did the dinosaur come from? This is 1960s Alabama. Why is there a dinosaur? Oh, I just like dinosaurs. And so, as you can imagine, there's some disasters where you're like, well, that's not really working. And they're like, well, I love dinosaurs, I want a dinosaur in the book. You're like, well, you can't put it in the last chapter. Okay. No one will get it. And so, so again, things we learned was that, Steven and I, because we were kind of the guys doing a lot of the work with the podcast, posting it, editing it, coming up with the branding, that sort of thing. We kind of make the ultimate decisions. And then also we learned to do a lot of planning at the beginning, because then everyone has input in the planning stage. So now everyone's got ownership. They feel like they have more ownership in it. And so we just try to do things that are going to challenge us, but sound fun. Like this season we're in right now, someone just threw out the idea a year ago, like, why don't we do cowboy dinosaurs? Like dinosaur cowboys. Why don't we, it's like going to be a Western, but they're on dinosaurs. And we laughed and laughed, but the more we thought about it, we were like, that actually sounds really fun. Let's do a Western, but they're on dinosaurs. And so we try to have fun with it, but also try to pick a genre that we may not be actually that comfortable with. I've never written a Western. I've never written a Western, but my dad had me watch a lot of Westerns. So it's kind of fun to look through, different genres and see, well, what are their tropes? What are their things? And what can we play with and be creative with? And so I saw a question about the screenplay. We have had the idea to do it with a screenplay, but we don't have actors. We don't have people who are comfortable playing actors, like playing a part, right? They'll read their chapter, but when you get into like doing a like an audio, like a radio program, audio kind of thing, they weren't comfortable with that. So we have batted that idea around, because I am trying to look at I want to write screenplays at some point. So I've been learning about screenplays, taking classes. So I would love to challenge myself and write a screenplay, and just for fun and learn. But yeah, we have people in our group who are like, I don't want to do voices. I can't do voices. I can't do this. I can't do that, And so anyway, so that's what's held us back from that. And I don't know if I answered the question about how we decide, but like I said, I think a lot of it is the fact that we try to have some planning meetings together where the people who are going to be involved for that next season feel like they have ownership. That's just good leadership to me, right? You give people ownership in what's going on, and they're creative too, and you give them input and all that sort of stuff. So
I'm curious, then you said you had a couple of stories that you gave away. Who gets credit for writing it? Is it the core group, or is it the group as a whole? Who's the by who?
Right. So how I make the cover and how I put it in there is by Brew and Ink, by the podcast. And then for that book, I will write out I'll write out the actual people who contributed. So, each individual author's name. And then like I said, we let them know, like, hey, we've gotten this many emails from the book funnel. Whenever you have anything to promote, even if they're not part of the group anymore, like I said, we've had one, person, she unfortunately got divorced and she had to move away and all this stuff. And I've told her, I said, even though you're no longer a part of the group, anytime you want to promote anything with your writing, I want to encourage her, within her writing, just let me know. So yeah.
Yeah, and I like how you've used the word seasons a lot. I'm a big podcast listener, and some podcast people every week after week after week after week, and it just seems so daunting to me. I just don't know if I could do that once or twice a week, year after year after year. And I'm fascinated by, you say seasons, and I know some podcasters do seasons. They'll do a certain length of a season, and then they take a break, and then they come back with a little bit different focus for the next season, which is sort of, how long's your season?
Yeah, we try to keep it from 10 to 14 episodes, and we do the story episodes are every 2 weeks, because we want to give the audience time to vote, and then we want to give the writer time to write. So that's about as quick of a turnaround as we feel like we can manage.
Yeah.
And then we try to make our episodes somewhere around the 30-minute mark, and I do that on purpose as well. Or we have been doing that because in the beginning we would have these conversations, and then we'd have this really long episode. And I'm like, look, if we want people to listen to the story, because we put the story at the end, and that's kind of what's bringing people in, then if we want them to binge it, they're used to binging 30-minute shows. So we try to keep it between our discussion and then the reading of the story. We try to keep it around half hour, so that as people look and they get into a story, they can just binge the whole thing. And then it's 10 or 14 episodes instead of 22 or 50 episodes. Like you're saying, it gets overwhelming if you look at a podcast. And we see that often, like, because I'll look at the data and the numbers for our podcast, and I'll look the next day and we've got like two downloads per episode all the way down so someone has gotten a hold of it and they just listened to the whole episode, the whole season, or whatever it might be. So yeah, I see a lot of questions on the tech side of it.
Yes. See, I'm gonna scroll up, just make sure we don't miss any of them. Okay, Leslie said, are the books only stories, or do you also do things about writing?
We don't give away any books on writing. We only give away the stories, but we try to have some sort of topic every episode on writing or something about the creative process. So, there's usually 10 or 15 minutes about that, and then 10 or 15 minutes of the story. And it is, I know some people are asking questions, but it is a commitment. Like if you're going to start a podcast, then just like Writers Chat, right? I mean, like you're going to do this every week on Tuesday at 11 o'clock. You have to have a certain number of people committed that, just in case one person leaves, you still got somebody to cover. And that's another good thing about the writers group, is if you've got a couple, somebody can be out and you still got a couple of people to have a conversation or to review something or whatever you're deciding to do that week. But it does take a commitment, and it does take a lot of learning how to upload things and how to do this and how to, it's just like anything. There's a learning curve in the beginning. So
that's a lot of time. Isabel's question is about, is it time consuming as a whole and worthwhile to get the faithful followers, or would they be volatile?
We haven't found it gets a whole lot of Facebook followers. Like for us, it hasn't. I honestly don't know a lot of podcasts, except for maybe some big ones, that have much of a presence on Facebook at all. The ones that I listen to, I get their emails because they've given me something and I had to give them my email to get it. So whatever the podcast is, I'm not really that involved on Facebook, but I get their emails every time there's an episode. And now we have, now for our podcast, we have, like I said, 2,000 people, so that every time we put out an episode, I email them. I give them a little email. Hey, what's up? Let's do this. What's going on? This is our, like a little newsletter. Here's our new episode. And so I haven't seen it build our Facebook. I think sometimes Instagram might be a little better, but we haven't focused as much on the Instagram as probably we should.
It makes sense. Do you find do you have like a core group of people who are like committed to listening to your podcast?
Yes. So we do have, we've got probably, the only way to really measure that is by the votes. So we probably have the same 20 or 30 people who vote. But with podcasting, if you guys listen to many podcasts, it's not the most, how do you say it? It doesn't lend itself to engagement as much, right? People just listen to a podcast, or they're mowing the lawn, or they're going to work, or they're doing whatever. So it doesn't necessarily lend itself to leaving comments or engagement as much. And so that's why I think the writing group and generating content that you can give away, it takes some time. It might take 6 months to a year, but it takes a little bit of time. But then you can give away some content and get emails, and now you're engaging with people in my opinion, better than social media. They're getting your emails, and then you're telling them Britt Mooney has a book coming out, this fall. Check it out. Now you've got other things, another way that you can promote. So yeah.
Okay, we got tons of questions at the point.
I do see tons of questions.
Yeah, I'm gonna comment some of the podcasts I like to listen to, sometimes they'll videotape them and put them on YouTube as well. So you have a choice to either listen to the podcast or watch it on YouTube, which I have found sometimes depending on where you're at, sometimes you want to watch, sometimes you just want to listen. So I think that's like a way to get two places of two things. All right, let's see here. Norma, she wants to start. I'm going to read some questions out loud because that way some of them might tie together. Okay, instead of going one by one. All right, so she wants to start a podcast. Not sure where to start. Looking for specific suggestions. Rhonda's asking questions about the technical stuff, the editing and programs, like what are the tools that you're using, and then it goes into scheduling, like by schedule and promotion. So I guess that's a good flow of questions. How to get started, what are the tools, what's a good schedule, and then promotion.
Yeah. So we use Libsyn as our hosting. So the main thing you have to figure out in the beginning, or main things you have to figure out, is who you're going to host your podcast with. There's like Anchor. I saw somebody put on there. I think that's relatively free or cheap. Podbean, Libsyn. These are kind of the big ones. So you have to figure out where your hosting is, and then you got to sign up for the hosting. And, you know, when you sign up for the hosting, you put your picture on there, you put your logo, you do all the stuff. And then the next step, which I think the last time I talked about this on the Writers Chat a year or two ago, the part that drove me crazy was hooking all the different platforms to Libsyn hosting, to the podcast host. So I didn't realize I was going to have to like go into iTunes and have my iTunes account and connect my iTunes account to Libsyn, to the podcast. And then I had to go into my Google account and link Google. And then I had to go to I had to start a Stitcher account and do Stitcher, and then tune in, and then do tune in, and then YouTube and hook it into you. So like every platform that you want to put it on, you have to hook into the podcast hosting system, because then what happens is when I upload it to Libsyn, it just automatically puts it out to all those platforms. I didn't realize there was not going to be that much work. But it's like anything, right? You don't realize it until you get into it, and you're like, holy crap, you know, I got a lot of work to do. So then there's that. And then there's also, I think with Anchor, look, you can do something as simple, like right now we are talking with, you know, my earbuds and my, you know, the little microphone on the earbuds, right? And I've done interviews with people and that's all they had, and the audio is fine. You just want the audio to be clear and clean. And I've started to use Zoom more to record, because I have a pro account with Crazy COVID, and I had to get a pro account with all that stuff. Now I can record and download audio files that are separate audio files for the people that were on the call. And so now I can do that and I put it into, and I upload it into GarageBand because I have a Mac, and that's easy. And it's, you know, I put a little music intro in on it, make sure everything sounds good, and then booyah, make an MP3, and then you do that. So you can spend a lot of money on the equipment and the software to do a podcast. If you just Google podcasting microphones and equipment, like, you can end up spending a couple grand easy. We have not spent that much. I spent $100 on a good microphone for myself, and again, all the other equipment I already had. As far as the computer, I had GarageBand. And now the other thing that I thought was a good choice for me about podcasting is I already had a lot of musical equipment, because I used to think I was a rock and roll star. So I have some recording equipment that I could use as well. So.
All right, good. And then what about scheduling? Weekly schedule? Like
yeah, weekly. So most podcasts are weekly. We do every other week. I think every other week is about the minimum. I think if you do 2 a month, that's about the minimum. You don't want people to forget about you. You want people to keep checking you out, subscribe, and all that kind of stuff. And so, but we also do what we call interbrews, which we do like on the interim between the story part of our podcast. Bethany and Michelle have been on one.
Yeah.
One of the times that they came in to do, when you did the writing thing, you stayed for like an hour before you got on the road to Florida. And then, so, and we do reviews of, popular movies and TV shows and writing conferences that we've been to. And we just use that as kind of a catch-all for some extra content where we can just have conversations and have some extra content with some interviews. I've interviewed Kyle Young. I've interviewed publishers. I've interviewed editors. I've interviewed, that's one of the great things about Serious Writer and the club is, being able to be connected, and Word Weavers, being able to be connected with a lot of people in the industry that I've been able to have on the show and do a little interview with them as authors or professionals and kind of get their feedback. There's a great interview with Brian Davis, the author. I don't know if you know who he is, spec fit guy, Christian spec fit guy. And he talked about how his book was, rejected. The same book was rejected like 30 times or something. And he's got a whole big file full of the rejections. And it's just great interviews, So we try to intersperse those in the middle if we can, but at the minimum, we're going to do every other week.
Well, it sounds like you've got a lot of people in here who are willing to be interviewed too. So it's a nice collection of people in Writers Chat.
Message me. Find me on Facebook. Message me. I love to have interviews.
Let's see. We need to get you on the Academy with the class for this, Britt. That is something that is happening in the chat right now. So let's talk later.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea just in general, just because there's so many details about it. I'm sitting here talking about it and I'm sure people are going like, I'm going to have to watch this again, just because like I had to have somebody, and I've helped other people too, but there was a friend of mine who was starting a podcast, but it was a wrestling podcast. But what a great niche, right? He can talk about local wrestling. He can talk about big wrestling, on the national stage. He can talk about, the local guys who dress in their underwear and knock each other over, back in the, behind the barbecue place. They can do all kind of stuff, and they've got fans. They've got ready-made fans for their content.
Right.
So I was very impressed, and it was something I was already looking at doing. And so I just called him and did what we're doing now. I just started asking him questions like, what the heck do you do, man? Like, I have no clue what I'm doing. And so I think it's good to have those sort of information you can go back to and look at.
Somebody asked, do you post on LinkedIn? Is that for the podcast?
I don't post on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a mystery to me. I'm on LinkedIn and I do stuff on LinkedIn. And I am sure some people make it work for them, but it's one of those things that I just haven't figured out how to make it. And I think part of it, I just don't put the energy into it.
I know.
I think that's part of it.
I'll have her on to talk about LinkedIn because she gets a lot of work from LinkedIn. Michelle does.
Yeah.
Like, people use it as part of her freelance. Maybe that'll be a nice writer's chat to have. Like, how to make
That would be a good one. I'd watch that one.
Right? All right. So if you put a question in here and I have missed it, please throw it back in here. I see one from Rhonda. Okay, so we've got promotion question from.
Oh, okay. So here's promotion. I forgot about promotion.
I did too.
All right.
Sorry, Renee.
So thank you. So the secret is Facebook ads. And so again, just like with anything, here's what I did that was wrong. I started with YouTubes. I started posting YouTubes on our Facebook page. we only have a few hundred followers on our Facebook page, but I would I would post a YouTube on Facebook because that's what I saw somebody else do. And I was like, oh, that must be what you do. And so I put it on Facebook, and then I used that as an ad, and I got nothing. I got very little as far as, any downloads or anything. We got very little downloads from the Facebook ad. So I'm like, well, that's just throwing money away. Well, then I used the direct download link from Libsyn. In other words, if you click the link, it doesn't take you to YouTube. It doesn't take you anywhere else. It just plays right on the device, whatever you're on, the computer, the phone. And then that got a ton of downloads, ton more. Because then when people are clicking on it, they're not clicking over to, like I said, another website or another app or anything like that. It's just playing right there on their phone. And they can still scroll through Facebook while they're listening or whatever they're doing, And so that's the secret. And as with Facebook ads, you have to learn Facebook ads. So that's kind of a whole other issue. You have to learn targeting. You have to learn, the copy and what to say. And it's just like, there's a whole another part of that. That's a whole other discussion. But that's what we've done. And Facebook's algorithms change every few months. And so what worked last month was not working all of a sudden. You got to figure out why. And so just like with a lot of stuff, because nobody talks about, platform or anything like that on here. But just like with anything on, that sort of social media and engagement, you got to just kind of keep up with it, and you're always learning. But for us, the promotion is Facebook, Facebook ads, and that's better than obviously Instagram ads, I think, for a couple different reasons. But I think if we got more into Instagram ads, if I learned more about it, it would be similar, because they're so connected now. Instagram and Facebook are so connected.
If you've got a business podcast, LinkedIn might be a good place to do ads there too, because it's low cost. And I did just see something where, because the business, again, it's always going to be about big business versus small business, kind of lumping us as writers into small business. But if big businesses are pulling money out of Facebook advertising, means the cost goes down for small business. So like, you have to kind of look at what's going on. Like, this is a good time to be buying Facebook ads because the cost is lower.
Yep, it is.
If business comes in, the cost goes back up. And so something else to pay, is a lot to pay attention to, actually.
Yeah. It's been working really well the last couple months. It has been amazing. The amount of response we've gotten from Facebook ads. Now I do, and I've also learned I do Facebook ads because it's audio and it's on the internet, and I'm giving away ebooks. I do it across English speakers all over the world. So I'm targeting people who are going to like the podcast, but I'm targeting them from India to Northern Africa to, English speaking places in Germany and, and all these kind of places. And so that also, I think, helps to kind of build some downloads and momentum.
Yes. Global. It's global. Do you have a favorite source for learning how to podcast? A question from Rhonda.
Yeah. There are, I think with anything, you just kind of, I don't have anything that's off the top of my head. There are some great YouTubes where people talk about, especially equipment. You have to be careful because a lot of the YouTubes are trying to sell you something. But I think that there are, just like with anything, there's some YouTubes out there where you can kind of get started and see what people do. If you pick one, like if you pick Libsyn or Podbean, if you pick one of those sources or one of those hosting sites to use, they have YouTubes and they have little things out the wazoo about how to do stuff and how to connect things and how to do things. So that, I'm sorry, I don't have any like one specific thing that I look at. I Google it and look on YouTube and try to find the best YouTube I can for whatever my question is, Right.
What about Okay, so Isabel's curious. about Instagram stories and IGTV. Have you played around with either one of those?
I have for my own personal author account, and I've gotten a lot of response from that, but I don't do, someone else on our team does the Instagram side, and so I haven't been doing this, a lot. But we put the votes on stories, and that seems to work really well. We get some good response from that, but we haven't done very many IGTVs on Instagram. Yeah, we haven't done much of that. Again, the videos, like I said, the engagement on Facebook itself hasn't seemed to really work for us as a podcast. I don't know why, and maybe just because I'm not that good looking or something. I don't know, but it could be a lot of different things. But again, I think the emails, getting the emails to me is the coup. That's the coup, because you're getting emails and you're able to market to people directly in a way that, because we all know with Facebook and Instagram, you are, as we just talked about, you're always limited by their algorithms about how many people are going to see it anyway. Even if you have 2,000 people that follow you on Facebook or Instagram, you're not, unless you put an ad out to those specific people, they're not going to see it all the time. But with an email, they're going to see it. Even if they just scroll by it, they're going to see it. And if you can put something in there where you're giving something away or giving them something of value, going back to those sort of principles, is good.
So I want to clarify, talking about because this is what I think is interesting about the different social media things, is we have to think about how we're also consuming. And I mean, I don't do this. I'm wondering if anybody does this. Do you ever go on Facebook looking for a podcast? Because I feel like I would Google that question instead of going to Facebook.
Right.
Which makes sense why you might not want to have a page or groups or anything like that over on Facebook, because that's not what people are looking for, that type of thing. But running the Facebook ad gives you a chance to pull in emails from Facebook's database, and then now you're connecting with them via email.
Right.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Let me see. Just lots of comments in here. Renee had a question. She said, do you think that we're all more into podcasts because we're rather fed up with Hollywood?
If we're because we're fed up with Hollywood?
She said, yeah.
Oh, no, I mean, I think people are getting into podcasts because audiobooks and doing things on our phones has become so much easier. And so I think podcasts have become a lot more popular because you can get into a niche, like I said, with wrestling or with something else, and you can have interesting, fun conversations. And if you can make them short enough or engaging enough, then people can do it on their way to work, or they can do it while they're doing something else. And people are just used to that. They're used to the noise, for good or bad, they're used to the noise around them all the time. And so I just think podcasts, I don't know if it's kind of, if we've hit saturation yet. We're probably close, because a lot of people have podcasts. But I think podcasting is one of those ways that people will listen to what you have to say. You can have interesting guests. Another thing that really works with podcasting, and I haven't even talked about this, is podcasts are a great way to network. It's, again, because of the saturation, it's probably not as much as it used to be. But just like for right now, when I talked about having guests on my podcast, right? Like all these people are like, I want to be your guest on your podcast, podcasting to me is the next blogging. Like, that's the next blog, right? To me. And so if you can have people on your podcast and say, I'd love to have you on for 10, 15 minutes, doing a little interview. And I've made so many friends just by asking them to be on my podcast. And then you have people, I've had people, especially with my other podcasts, but even with this one, Kyle will text me, have this person, you need to call this person, have them on your podcast. Just people start sending you people to have on your podcast. And it's just a great way to network as well. So even beyond the getting emails, even beyond the engagement and platform building, it's a great way to network. because people love to talk about themselves like I'm doing today. People love to talk about themselves, and people love to feel like an expert, and you can have people on and make them feel like an expert, make them feel important, and you make a friend, you know?
Right. I love that. And so, okay, so that leads into another question. Do you see the next move past podcasts? Because I think podcasts is the new media equivalent of traditional media radio, right? So what do you think is the next move, or do you think like
YouTube shows, not just watching a podcast conversation happen, but actual YouTube TV shows, like just doing it like it's a TV show. I think to me, that's what I think. I think, because I think the technology is getting to the point where people can put together a pretty good looking and sounding little piece of something. And, so I think it's like a YouTube TV channel, like having your own YouTube TV. And I just think the technology is getting to the point where there's not that hurdle to do it. And there's already been some great people who've been doing it for years, just like they were podcasters for years. But I think the next wave is going to be people putting a little niche show together and it looks good and it's fun and it's short, and people can just always expect that it's going to be this thing every week or every couple of weeks. And I think it's going to happen more and more. That's my guess. I could be wrong though.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the people who are like YouTube famous anyway. That's kind of what they've done. And it would just be, if they wanted to go podcasting, they could probably just take their audio quality and intro it as what it is, and people could do something they want.
Yeah. But I think so far it's been like, okay, Joe Rogan's on YouTube, and I watch like you're saying, I watch his podcast on YouTube, or a lot of it's just what I'm seeing, because just like your son, I think, Bethany, right? Like my son wants to be a YouTuber. That's his goal in life. And so, but they want to be a YouTuber because they just sit there and they make funny sounds and make jokes while they play a video game. It's not, I think the next step, to be honest, is doing like a game show, doing your own game show and having guests on I just think it's going to be, people are going to be able to get more creative with it and have fun with it. In ways that we haven't seen yet, You
watch Dude Perfect? Are you familiar with them?
Melissa,
yes? Yep. Okay, so it's these five guys who all played college basketball together, and they ended up doing trick shots, and they would just film that on YouTube. So that was like where they got started. My kids are obsessed with them. I have sat down and watched episodes with them, but they even had Zac Efron playing this crazy game of golf with them recently. And it's like, look at the life that they're living. They've changed their family tree. They're millionaires now with this, but they do these game show kind of things, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Like, they got this little setup. They all got microphones, and then they're playing and interacting with their people. I'm like, this is what they get to do for a living. It's super fun and super, super fun. So check out Dude Perfect, guys. It's a very clean channel. Like, your kids can watch it, and you're. I think most of them are Christians, actually.
They are.
They are. So it's one of those ones where it's like, what are you watching? Dude Perfect. Yeah, that's fine. Dude Perfect on on YouTube. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're on TV too, but YouTube is where you find them.
Yeah, I like that idea of series and shows on YouTube. YouTube is part of my strategy going forward. All right, so we probably need to go ahead and bring people back in because we are close to time. Britt, this was so fun.
This was so fun.
Do you want to
you guys are fun.
Tell us about the Brew and Ink podcast real quick before we go off the recording.
Yeah, so Brew and Ink podcast. We're still working on we're redoing the website. We've taken some of the COVID time to retool some things, but we're on Facebook, Brew and Ink, AND. Brew and Ink on Facebook and Instagram, and again, we're in the middle of season 6, which is the title is Hero is a 4-letter word, and it's a Western fantasy that we are having a lot of fun with, and and we do we do a lot of reviews too. So we not only do we do some interviews, we do a lot of reviews of, you know, stuff that's going on in pop culture. And we try to look at it from the perspective of a writer, like from the writing standpoint, what did they do that was fun, that was interesting, that was different? And we kind of try to give insights as far as some of that. And that's pretty much it.
Anybody got any questions for Britt before we go off the recording? It's so good to see all of your faces, by the way. If anyone needs help getting back on, just let us know. All right, so we're gonna close out. Oh wait.
Well, actually, I have a question. I do videos interviewing authors, and then I post them a couple of different places. One is YouTube. So you actually see the video. Would you think I could take those videos and create them into a podcast and post them? Would that make any sense at all?
I absolutely. I think it would. I mean, I think depending on how you're recording them, how are you recording them, on Zoom, or what are you?
I'm doing them on Zoom. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could easily download them also into audio files and just make a quick MP3 of the conversation as well, and just post that as a podcast, because
Okay.
that's just going to be a whole nother world where people can search for you and find you, you know.
Okay.
And it probably, once you get into it, it'll probably be if you're already used to uploading on YouTube and kind of going through those steps,
Yep.
you know, you can probably figure out the podcasting steps pretty quickly as well. Once you get down to it, it's just one extra step whenever you do an interview, and now there's a whole nother way for people to check it out. Because again, we're doing all kind of things where we're not really able to sit and watch a YouTube, and so this gives people another avenue. I think it'd be great.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, awesome. So we're gonna close out the recording, and then stay tuned for the after party. We'll be on here for a few minutes where you can say what you want to say off the recording. It's like free time for us. So thank you guys for all being here. And Britt, this was awesome. And again, like I said, we want you back to talk about specifically spec fic, and then some really cool ways that you're building email lists through there. I know at the conference I was listening to you share in my class about that, and I was fascinated. So we definitely want that, because it can work for all genres too. So anyway, thank you guys, and have a great Tuesday. We will see you next week.